World War II, the Battle of Britain, the fight for the skies. The summer of 1940. You are sitting in a cockpit made of little more than metal tubing and canvas. Your hands grip a control column that vibrates with the roar of a Rolls-Royce Merlin engine. Below you, the English Channel shimmers like polished steel. Above you, the sky is empty, but you know they are coming. In the distance, a speck appears, then another, then hundreds. And in that moment, you are not just a pilot. You are the last line of defense between the world and total darkness. This is a story of how a handful of young men, flying fragile machines, changed the course of history. This is the Battle of Britain. By the summer of 1940, the Nazi war machine had done the impossible. In just a few short weeks, Hitler's forces had swept through Belgium, the Netherlands, and France. The British Expeditionary Force had been driven into the sea at Dunkirk, retreating in a desperate armada of fishing boats and pleasure craft. Europe had fallen, and now Adolf Hitler stood on the cliffs of northern France, staring across the narrow strip of water that separated him from his final prize, Britain. He called it Operation Sea Lion. It was to be the invasion that would end the war. But there was one obstacle. A small, stubborn, and utterly fearless Air Force that refused to surrender. The Royal Air Force. Hitler's generals knew that to invade Britain, they first had to destroy the RAF. They had to win control of the skies. And so began the first major military campaign fought entirely in the air. It was a battle of attrition, a battle of nerve, and ultimately a battle for the soul of the free world. Imagine the scene. It is July 1940. The beaches of southern England are lined with barbed wire. Concrete pillboxes sprout from the cliffs. Church bells are silenced, waiting to ring out the signal of invasion. In villages across the countryside, men gather with pitchforks and hunting rifles, the home guard, ready to make a last stand against the panzers. But everyone knows the truth. If the Luftwaffe breaks through, if the Germans gain air superiority, no amount of home guard courage will stop the fall of Britain. In London, a bulldog of a man stands before the House of Commons. Winston Churchill has just become Prime Minister. He is blunt. He is defiant. He tells the nation, "We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall never surrender." His words are powerful, but behind closed doors, the War Cabinet knows that Britain's survival depends on just one thing: the pilots of Fighter Command. And those pilots are outnumbered. The Luftwaffe, the German Air Force, boasts over 2,500 aircraft. The IAF has barely 600 operational fighters. The German pilots are battle-hardened veterans of the Spanish Civil War and the invasion of Poland. The British pilots? They are barely men. The average age is just 22. Many have never fired their guns in anger, but they have one advantage. They are fighting over their own soil, and they have something that the Germans do not. A secret hidden in a network of masts and wooden huts scattered along the coastline. It is called Chain Home, a series of towering steel radio masts that pulse with invisible energy. Radar. The British had perfected it years before the war. The Germans had radar too, but they never understood how deeply the British relied on it. From these stations, technicians stare at glowing green screens, watching for blips that represent incoming aircraft. They can tell the direction. They can tell the altitude. They can even estimate the number of planes. And in a matter of seconds, that information is relayed to a command center buried deep beneath the ground. In the underground bunkers, controllers push wooden markers across vast tabletop maps. They are playing a deadly game of chess. They know exactly where the German bombers are, and more importantly, where they are heading. Fighter Command does not need to scramble its entire force to chase shadows. They can wait. They can conserve fuel and ammunition. They can choose their moment. Down in the airfields, the pilots wait. They lounge on the grass, playing cards, reading letters from home, trying to sleep. The tension is unbearable. They know that any moment, the scramble siren will shriek, the telephone will ring, and they will have to run to their Spitfires and Hurricanes. The Spitfire, it is the icon, the beautiful, elliptical wing predator that can outturn anything the Germans have. But the real workhorse of the battle is the Hawker Hurricane. It is older, slower, less glamorous, but it is rugged, stable, and heavily armed. The Hurricanes will take the brunt of the fighting, going after the German bombers. The Spitfires, the faster killers, will take on the Messerschmitt 109 fighters. Together, they form a lethal partnership. On August 13th, 1940, the Germans launch a massive offensive. They call it ****, Eagle Day. The plan is simple. Destroy the RAF airfields in southern England. Bomb the radar stations. Cut off the head of the snake. On that morning, the sky over Kent and Sussex becomes a cauldron of fire. Hundreds of Junkers Ju-87 Stuka bombers, their sirens screaming like demons, plunge towards the airfields. Messerschmitt swarm overhead like angry wasps, covering the bombers from British interceptors. And the RAF responds. The Hurricanes and Spitfires climb hard, the pilots straining against the G-forces. They meet the enemy over the white cliffs of Dover. In the chaos of the dogfight, there is no room for error. The air is filled with tracer bullets and the sound of tearing canvas. Pilots tone, climb, dive, and spin, desperately trying to get their gun sight on an enemy's fuselage. One moment, you are flying. The next, your cockpit shatters and the cold air rushes in as you fall through the sky. The battle rages for weeks. Day after day, the Luftwaffe returns. Day after day, the RAF pilots scramble, climb, fight, and sometimes do not return. The losses are mounting. August 18th becomes known as the hardest day. The Germans lose 6 to 9 aircraft. The British lose 68. It is a brutal parity that Britain cannot afford. The airfields are cratered. The runways are unusable. The ground crews work through the night, filling craters with gravel, patching up damaged planes, dragging wreckage away. They are exhausted. The pilots are exhausted. And the supply of trained pilots is dwindling dangerously. Churchill visits the underground command center at Uxbridge. He watches the markers move across the map. He asks Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding, the commander of Fighter Command, what reserves are left. Dowding replies, none. The RAF is on its knees. One more week of sustained attacks on the airfields, and Fighter Command might collapse. Invasion would be imminent. And then, fate intervenes in the most unexpected way. It is the night of August 24th. A German bomber, damaged and lost, jettisons its load over London. The bombs fall on the East End. It is an accident. But Churchill seizes the opportunity. He orders a retaliatory raid on Berlin. It is a small raid, causing little damage. But Hitler is furious. His pride is wounded. In a rage, he changes the entire strategy. He issues a new order. Stop attacking the airfields. Target the cities. Target London. It is the single greatest mistake of the campaign. The Luftwaffe shifts its focus from the RAF's airfields to the civilian population. On September 7th, the Blitz begins. 250 German bombers, escorted by 600 fighters, descend on London. They drop their payloads on the docklands, on the homes, on the ordinary men, women, and children going about their daily lives. The East End burns. St. Paul's Cathedral is surrounded by a ring of fire. The city screams. But for the pilots of Fighter Command, it is a gift. The pressure on the airfields is suddenly lifted. They can breathe. They can regroup. The ground crews repair the runways. The mechanics patch up the Hurricanes. New pilots, rush through training, are thrown into the squadrons. The RAF is battered, but it is not broken. And now, instead of protecting the airfields, they are protecting London itself. The morale of the pilots soars. September 15th, 1940. It is a clear, crisp day. The sun rises over the channel, casting long shadows across the fields. And the Germans come in force. Their intelligence suggests that the RAF is finished. They believe one final hammer blow will break the back of British resistance. They send wave after wave of bombers and fighters towards London, the largest force ever assembled. On the ground, the radar masts pick up the incoming swarm. The blips multiply until the screens are almost solid. The controllers, calm and methodical, scramble every single available aircraft. All 12 squadrons of fighter command rise into the sky. They climb to 25,000 feet, the engines straining in the thin air. Below them, they can see the River Thames winding through the city. And above them, they can see the black specks of the approaching enemy. The battle that follows is the largest air battle ever fought. It unfolds over the suburbs of London. The Spitfires engage the Messerschmitts high above. The Hurricanes dive through the bomber formations, aiming for the bomber's cockpit or engines. The sky becomes a swirling vortex of burning aircraft, white condensation trails, and drifting parachutes. Pilots see their friends explode in midair. Some bail out, floating gently towards the ground as the battle continues around them. The German pilots look down at the British capital. They see the RAF fighters rising to meet them again and again. They expected to find a beaten enemy. Instead, they find defiance. After 2 massive raids, the Luftwaffe retreats. They have lost 56 aircraft. The RAF has lost only 28. But more importantly, the Luftwaffe has failed to achieve air superiority. As the sun sets on September 15th, the German High Command realizes the truth. Operation Sea Lion is impossible. You cannot invade an island if you do not control the sky. The Battle of Britain did not end the war. It would rage on for another 5 years. But it was the first major defeat of the Nazi war machine. It proved that Hitler was not invincible. It bought Britain the time it needed to rearm, to rebuild, and to serve as a launching pad for the eventual liberation of Europe. Most importantly, it preserved the flame of freedom in a world that was rapidly being consumed by darkness. Those who fought in the sky above England were called a few. Churchill immortalized them in one of the most famous speeches of the century. Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few. They were ordinary young men, British, Canadian, Polish, Czech, Australian, and New Zealander, who did an extraordinary thing. They looked into the face of tyranny, and they did not blink. Today, as you walk through the quiet villages of Kent, or gaze up at the blue sky over London, it is hard to imagine the inferno that raged 80 years ago. The scars have healed. The grass has grown over the bomb craters. But the memory of those pilots remains. Their courage, their sacrifice, their refusal to surrender, that is a true legacy of the Battle of Britain. The fight for the skies was won not just by metal and bullets, but by the unbreakable spirit of a nation that refused to fall. If you enjoyed this journey into history, please consider subscribing for more documentary deep dives. And tell us in the comments below, which moment in British history should we reconstruct next? The Blitz? D-Day? The Tudor Court? We would love to hear from you. Thank you for watching. And as those pilots once said, never forget,